I said House Bill 524, absolutely. The chair offers up committee substitute to House Bill 524 and recognizes Chairman Tepper to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll stand in my fighting stance. I like all the attention on me as well. Chairman Bell and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to lay out House Bill 524. Little background, voters in the city of Lubbock rejected a citizen-initiated measure in 2024, Proposition A, that sought to limit enforcement of certain marijuana offenses. If passed, the measure would have prohibited the Lubbock Police Department from making an arrest or issuing a citation for a Class A or a Class B misdemeanor marijuana possession, except in limited circumstances. The possession and delivery of marijuana is a state crime. Local governments cannot refuse to enforce state law. Although current law does not allow a municipality to adopt, enforce, or maintain an ordinance or rule that violates state law, current law does not prohibit a municipality from having an election on such measures. House Bill 524 would prohibit a home rule municipality from holding an election on a citizen-initiated measure if any part of the measure violates state law. If a municipality receives a citizen-initiated petition to adopt, amend, or repeal a rule or ordinance, House Bill 524 would require the municipality to submit the measure to the Attorney General's office for their review. The Attorney General's office would have 30 days to review the measure. If the Attorney General's office believes any part of the measure would violate state law, the municipality would not be allowed to hold an election on the measure. The bill would also require election on such citizen-initiated measures to occur on a uniform election date. The committee substitute would allow the Attorney General's office to extend the time to review a measure by 2 weeks if the Attorney General needs additional time. The substitute also removes the cause of action in the introduced legislation. The drafting attorney has informed my office that current law would allow a municipality to bring a suit for declaratory action against the Attorney General's office if the municipality disagrees with the Attorney General's determination. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Members, any questions? Vice Chair Joyner.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you for laying out this bill, Representative Tepper. I'll be frank, it's something I'm quite concerned about because my district likes these ballot measures. And I'm curious.
And to be clear, I don't dislike them either. But if they conflict with state law, we have sort of a constitutional conflict here, and certainly the local governments, the supremacy is with the state as opposed to local governments. But sorry, go ahead. I shouldn't have interrupted.
Well, and so I guess I wanted to get clarity. Is your main concern with these the cannabis ones in particular?
In particular, and there have been others that conflict. I'm trying to remember now, and I meant to write it down, but I think there have been some others that conflict with state law, and I think we need to nip this in the bud early. I believe it's a false choice, and it's also dishonest to the voting public. They consider that this is going to be law if they go through all the work to have the petition. It's a lot of work. Get the petition signatures, get them submitted to the city secretary. The city secretary says that they are indeed enough, and then you go through a campaign process that costs time and money for both sides, or three sides, who knows. And in the end, even if that ballot had passed in Lubbock, for example, it still would have been in conflict with state law and would set up a lawsuit and more issues, and I would argue a constitutional crisis.
So San Marcos ended up through a ballot initiative having an election around the enforcement of cannabis through the local police department in 2022. Do you know what percentage that measure prevailed by?
No, I believe, I remember reading about it. I don't remember the percentage. I can give you Lubbock's percentage, which was 65% against that measure.
Yep. In San Marcos, it was 81% for. And the Attorney General sued San Marcos last year in January. And the Attorney General lost in district court. Obviously, he's still exercising his right to appeal. But I guess what I'm saying is I think this question of whether or not these are enforceable and constitutional is something the courts are sorting out right now. So why do you think a bill helps resolve this when our courts are working through exactly this question right
Well,
now?
because we have the right to submit the bills as well to resolve it for the courts. The courts follow the law, not the other way around. We are the legislature. We have supremacy there as well. If there is a law strictly forbidding these referendums or a certain law that is produced by these referendums, then we would be making the decision for the courts, essentially.
Is this law strictly prohibiting them, or is it giving the Attorney General this different ability to step in at the beginning instead of allowing him his normal process of bringing a lawsuit? I mean, it sounds like this would still end up in a lawsuit either way.
This is heading off the lawsuit, correct?
Well, no, but you just said under current law, under the underlying law,
We don't know.
a city would be able to
I believe
bring.
we don't know
No,
yet.
like that a city would be able to bring a suit to say, no, Attorney General, you're wrong. We do get to put this on the ballot. Isn't that correct?
Yes, but it would add another really tough measure to it. And I believe we would still be heading off the issue before it misleads the voters, frankly.
Yeah. Are you concerned about leadership in the Attorney General office, not necessarily current leadership, but at some point in the future being arbitrary about this?
I'm not sure if your question, how would it be arbitrary if, for example, the cannabis issue is illegal in the state of Texas?
To be clear, I think the legal question isn't, is cannabis illegal in the state of Texas? So that is a question that's gotten a little more complicated with some of our hemp legislation.
Yes.
I think predated your arrival here. But I think it's a question of how much ability cities have to dictate the ways in which their local police officers spend resources. So I want to be clear. I think the legal question's a little different. But I know that historically a lot of these ballot measures that have been contested, including one by the city of Houston just a few years ago against Mr. Hotze, was over arguments around taxpayer transparency and how the city charter interacted with that. I think it would have been pretty easy to imagine an attorney general of maybe a different political stripe than our current attorney general trying to keep that off the ballot. But instead, it went through the process. The city of Houston fought it, but Mr. Hotze actually ended up winning that case. And so I guess what I'm wondering, are you concerned about this sort of becoming part of, a single elected official's politics instead of going through a judge?
Representative
And judges, in
or
fact,
Vice Chairman,
yeah.
I think that goes to, I think that could be arbitrary, depending on who's in office at the time. You're going to disagree with the current Attorney General. I think I'm going to agree. I think we're hoping that the bureaucracy that reviews these things is going to be fair and just. And so there are also legal experts and professionals at the Attorney General's office, which is why we brought it there instead of the Secretary of State's office.
If I could interject one point, obviously, what we should be looking at anytime we're talking about something on the dais is policy, not, so when you're talking about the bill in written reference to who holds an office, and I'm just.
Yeah,
weighing
and
in,
not,
yes, I'm just, yeah, so it's.
I guess, it's
not a
do the
dialogue about-
hypotheticals affect
It's a
policy
hypo-
into the future, I suppose?
It's about the office, not the holder, is my only point, just for, as you talk about your bill, I would assume it's about the office, not an office holder. And so anyway, I'm not trying to
No,
get
and-
into this conversation, but just trying to constrain it to what is statutory and what is not.
yeah, and I apologize. I think my questions are about like the different natures of the office, and one is much more high profile. Like the Attorney General is more high profile, tends to be more of a political creature in that office than, say, on the Supreme Court. And are you aware, Representative Sepper, that the Attorney General can't actually declare what the law is? He can just offer advice on that.
I'm aware of that, and I'm also aware that his decisions have, during COVID, opened up churches and gun stores, against the executive order of the governor. I don't know if you remember that. And again, everything's political. The Supreme Court's political. We elect them. Mm-hmm. The Secretary of State's appointed by the governor's office. We also looked at putting it there. We had some internal conversations and debate about this. but we felt that the legal expertise generally of the Attorney General's office would be the most appropriate to carry this bill, carry this measure.
Right. Well, I maintain some concerns, but I do want to bring up a couple other numbers. Colleen had one of these cannabis measures on the ballot. Do you know what percentage it passed with?
No, ma'am, I'm not advised.
69.5%. Harker Heights, 64%. Austin, surprising no one here, has the highest number, 85.81%.
Sure, of course.
It's only slightly higher than San Marcos. Denton, 71.3%. Elgin, 75.3%. Lockhart, 68%. Bastrop, 69.7%. Dallas, 66.8%. And I guess the reason I asked, you said like,
But do you know if they had organized opposition to those referendums?
I mean, when 81% of the community supports, I'm not sure there's that much opposition to organize.
I mean,
But
but again, other cities, well, we defeated it because we were very organized and got out there and gave the truth about the consequences of that particular item. And again, this is not about strictly cannabis, but if there are other companies that you mentioned, the Hotze issue, if there are other items that come up that are against state law and are in conflict, we are simply trying to clear that out from the beginning of the process of the referendum rather than after it's done and it ends up in a legal question.
yeah, well, I think where we disagree is where the proper place to resolve that legal question is. But I guess what I wanted to ask is, are you concerned about sort of interfering with the will of the voters on this, where we have
I guess that's a
multiple
question. Do you
cities
want to
with
pure? You asked a
super-
question. I'm going to answer. I guess the question is: do you believe in a pure democracy or a republic? We are right now in a representative republic. We can put everything online now and vote on it, and we can all go home and leave the building as a museum. But we have a representative republic where we elect representatives to make some of these decisions. Because maybe we spend more time on it or what have you, but I believe more of in a republic than a pure democracy where everyone would vote on every measure.
I mean, obviously, with the number of people we have in the state of Texas, we can't pull off a pure democracy. But to quote our Supreme Court, Judge Bland, just writing in 2023, the ballot initiative process is the exercise by the people of a power reserved to them and not the exercise of a right granted. It has its historical roots in the people's dissatisfaction with officialdom's refusal to enact laws. And I guess my question is, at what point do we listen to that and allow some of these communities to direct how their law enforcement resources are spent and direct them towards things like violent crime and property crime instead of these low-level cannabis offenses?
That's why I'm up here, where I think we're fixing to decide. I like the referendum process on things that are legal by state law already. There are city charter referendum processes and such. There's recall processes that's along the same line, depending on the city's charter, home rule city's charter.
But law enforcement discretion in how they spend their time is also legal under state law, correct?
I'm not sure how that's relevant.
Well,
We have
because
laws.
that's what these propositions are asking for. They are asking their police departments to focus their resources on different crimes. They're not legalizing cannabis in the city.
But the citizens believe that these
talking about-
substances are dangerous to the public. And Texas is Texas.
I would challenge you to put that on the ballot if you think that's where the majority of
I just have
Texans
a
are.
question. I don't want to live in Portland or Seattle and the stink of New York right now, Denver. I live in Texas. I have different expectations, and I want to enforce these laws of marijuana. If the legislature wants to revisit legalizing marijuana, then we need to do that. But having each individual city have their own rules on a very major decision, I believe is not the process to go by.
We've heard some conversation in this committee already about limited law enforcement resources. And so I'm curious why this focus on ballot propositions that are about trying to direct those resources to where communities want them the most. should be a priority right now. Can you?
I will put you down as a no.
So, yeah, I think we're kind of in a loop. So what I think I hear you saying is that that you support referendums, but where those referendums are a question of, does a community support violating current state law, that's where your bill would prevent that referendum from occurring. Not just randomly, any referendum couldn't occur, is kind of what I hear. If you boil it all down to referendums and the conversation y'all been having, is that a true statement
That the referendum on the front end would not conflict with current state law.
Basically any referendum wouldn't conflict with? So if it was against the law to I don't know, to have anything occurring, whatever's in current law, that a referendum, local community couldn't pass a referendum that would establish a position in opposition to a state law, is what I hear.
Which, to be clear, my understanding is the law. Texas does have supremacy. I think this question is this mechanism, and for deciding what's the law is what's a question here. So, but anyway, thank you for answering my questions, Representative Tepper.
Thank you, Vice Chairman.
Yep. One more question?
Oh,
Or more?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't see you over there.
Sorry.
She can go first.
Thank you.
Representative Luther.
Thank you. Hey, so my question is, would you see wouldn't it be a problem if like a local community, say, let's just use marijuana because that's the talk. If they legalized it in their little community, don't you think them crossing over county lines would cause even more problems, because there's not one big law that everybody's presiding under, and it's just going to cause a big problem if they try to go somewhere else?
Yes.
Representative Lowe.
Okay, so local control. This might be a bad example, but Texas passed a law that about abortion and went through the court system and kind of changed some policies and so forth. But here at the local level, sometimes we've got some really dumb laws here. And sometimes we got to push the envelope a little bit. So do you think you're taking away local control with this bill? And do you think that sometimes we need to have these mechanisms in place to challenge the laws that we already have?
I think I'm ensuring our different levels of government, that city council is subservient to the state. So is the county commissioner's court. The state is subservient to the federal government. And when they are in conflict, for example, the state and the federal government, when they are in conflict, the federal government has supremacy.
I have a quick question.
Representative Cole.
Is it your understanding that the Attorney General's ruling is not final, that it's only a recommendation, as Ms. Representative Sweena?
It would essentially be a recommendation.
And so I guess I'm having trouble with this idea that everybody can agree on what the state law is, and that the citizens' referendum is per se illegal if that hasn't been ruled on by a court. I mean, we often pass, and the reason I'm saying this is because we pass many bills that are challenged in the law, and the courts overturn them, or they go up on appeal. So I'm concerned that this bill abridges that process.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, it seems like we are continuing to encroach on the representative forms of government, the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch. And so assuming that the attorney general's recommendation that this is a violation of law is not true if it hasn't been through a court process to challenge it.
You know, I'm not an attorney. We are simply trying to cut off, I would argue, again, misleading the voters on what will be established by the referendum. If it's illegal by state law, according to the Attorney General, and I assume the Attorney General would use, you know, marijuana is illegal in Texas. The distribution of a certain type and a certain amount and such, without a prescription, I think we're getting there, will be illegal, and this referendum should not be on the ballot. And or is the city challenging or overreaching into the state authority by attempting this? It can go both ways.
So, thank you. So, all right, well, I just want to make sure anybody that happens to be watching knows that I think we all agree that referendums should be within the powers of the city on things like city ordinances, et cetera, and that citizen input on those types of ordinances are very important. But in general, city government, in practicality, city government doesn't override state law. That's just a statement from the chair, just as a general comment. Any other questions?
I would like to add, I think I misspoke. I think there was a question about whether the Attorney General's decision would be final. On page 2, section D, subject to subsection E, a municipality may not hold an election on a measure described by subsection A, the Attorney General's opinion, if the Attorney General determines that any portion of the measure would violate state law. So they would be precluded from having the election.
Chairman Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to, not my bill, but I would assume that if someone disagreed with the determination of the Attorney General's office here, and the attorney, let me back up. The Attorney General, as my understanding, has in several respects, makes certain determinations. There's a laundry list of things that they do, and I don't mean just issuing opinions, but they make determinations on contingency fee contracts with local governments. They make determinations regarding bonds and the issuance of bonds and all those type of things that they make determinations. But I think all of those things are subject to a review, judicial review, if and to the extent the claimant alleges that the Attorney General has abused his discretion. So, but I think, in fairness, most of the things that would be submitted under this, I don't think are higher levels, higher distinctions that we make in the law, whether something's illegal or whether it's not. Some of these things that I've seen with these ballot referendums are things that are clearly illegal in Texas. And so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that that's what your bill seeks to address, those things. But subject to that, anyone can seek recourse in the court system if they think that the Attorney General's overstepped his bounds.
That's correct. And just to add more fuel to the fire, what if it was cocaine? What if there was a referendum about we want to legalize cocaine in Amarillo? I think the entire legislature, even people maybe sympathetic with cannabis, might disagree with that. This would, at the front end, allow the Attorney General to preclude and stop the referendum election.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. And the chair reserves your right.
I reserve the right to close. Thank you.
So the chair calls Kathy Mitchell, self-equity action against the bill. If you would, please state your name, who you're testifying on behalf of, and your position on the bill for the record, please.
My name is Kathy Mitchell, and I am against the bill, testifying against the bill. I have been part of a number of ballot measure elections, and I am a huge proponent of the ability in Texas for local voters to put together a piece of legislation through direct democracy. This is allowed, and I will say, as to the illegal measure issue, cities don't have to implement an illegal ballot measure. That's actually how it works now.
Ma'am,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
just to make sure, did you note that you, because I didn't catch it, did you note that you're testifying on behalf of yourself and Equity Action?
Yes, sir. I thought I did, but.
If you would just repeat it
Yes,
for the record.
testifying on behalf of myself and Equity Action.
Thank you.
So current law is that if voters pass a ballot measure and it is illegal, what happens as a practical matter is the cities don't do it. That's what happens. And I will tell you that as a matter of politics, because ballot measures go through elections, the charge that something is illegal is very common. That is often what opponents will say about a perfectly good, perfectly legal ballot measure. And we've all heard it. If anyone who's been in a city for a ballot measure process has heard somebody claim that it's illegal. In my experience, most of those claims are spurious, but the onus is on the group that brought the ballot measure to force the city to implement it. That's how it works now. So illegal ballot measures don't get enacted if the group feels strongly, and of course they do, because ballot measures are not cheap and they are a big deal to put together. You do your homework before you do a ballot measure. What you do next is you sue the city. And I have done that on behalf of a perfectly legal ballot measure passed by an extraordinary margin by voters in my community that was in fact ruled to be perfectly legal. So we had to go to all the extra trouble to sue the city over this ballot measure, and they have now implemented it, more or less. So I'm here to say the system is not broken. Did I like having to sue the city to implement a very popular ballot measure? No, of course I didn't. But I don't believe that the system is broken, because that is the role of the courts. We have 3 branches of government, the legislature, and to the point of direct democracy, the people sometimes make the law, and then the courts rule on it. And so in our case, we had to sue the city. We had a judicial order that came down that said this is not a problem and you need to go ahead and do the thing. And here we are. So that's the system working as it's supposed to. And that's what our Constitution allows for us to have. It's why we have 3 types, 3 branches. So our concern is that this bill presents a usurpation of the 3rd branch of government, which is there to make those determinations, to Rep. Zwiener's point about kind of what each branch is for. So we are for our Constitution as it currently exists. We are for direct democracy, and we do not believe that even though groups like us occasionally have to sue over whether or not something is legal, that's just okay. Thank you very much.
Any questions, Ms. Witness? Thank you for testifying. Chair calls Ananda Tomas, testifying for Self Act for SA Action Fund. We will show her as did not testify, but was on file or on record as against the bill. Next up, Alicia Castillo, Texas Civil Rights Project, testifying against the bill. If you would, please state your name, who you're testifying on behalf of, and your position on the bill for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Castillo. I'm the Associate Director of Policy for the Texas Civil Rights Project, and we're testifying in opposition to this bill. Rep. Zwiener and Rep. Cole it covered most of my testimony. I was going to mention the specific Hotze v. Turner City of Houston case. I think that really summarizes it well, that the historical roots of this type of initiative process are with the people's dissatisfaction with officialdom's refusal to enact laws. And the removal of that right and that ability from the direct voters, if there were different, makeup in Texas political structure, I'm sure that some of you all would be more interested in making sure that individuals had the right to bring their own ballot initiatives to make their cities look how they want them to look, and to feel, to Representative Tupper's point, comfortable in the place where they live. So we also have concerns with separations of power. Of course, the three branches of government, as Kathy Mitchell before aptly mentioned, we think it's really important to maintain that separation. And lastly, just to be clear, the Texas Constitution already renders illegal ballot measures unenforceable. So this bill to us is a solution in search of a problem, and we believe it shouldn't advance because it is essential that Texas let voters vote on the propositions they want their localities to adopt without giving the AG veto power and extending this government overreach to our cities.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
For your testimony. Chair calls Devin Mitchell, testifying self against the bill. Okay, we'll show him did not testify, but again, registering against the bill. Chair calls Amy Camp, testifying self, Ground Game, Texas, against the bill. We'll show her as did not testify. Again, she is registered against the bill. Denise Palacios, Self and Climate Cabinet. Testifying registered against the bill. If you would, please state your name and who you're testifying on behalf of and your position on the bill, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bell, Vice Chair Zwiener, members. My name is Denise Palacios, and I'm a Rio Grande Valley resident testifying in opposition to HB524, representing myself and Climate Cabinet. House Bill 524 seeks to radically amend local government code by stripping power from your constituents and obliterating the long-respected self-organized democratic process of ballot initiatives. This bill expands the role of government and allows a state agency to meddle in local affairs. Members, if we trust your constituents enough to elect you, we should also trust their ability to petition, self-organize, and vote for or against local municipal ballot initiatives, which are then subject to our courts. Respectfully, I ask this committee to consider the following. Number one, this bill usurps local control and independence from constituents. How will you explain to your constituents watching right now, at the end of session, that you have removed their right to be the final voice on local measures, preemptively handing it over to a state agency instead of protecting local control and allowing the courts to decide? This bill, as written, removes local control, creates more bureaucracy, and centralizes power in a singular state figure, allowing an agency to interfere with the local democratic process. Members should also inquire LBB to re-examine and reevaluate the cost to taxpayers, burden to agency, and needed full-time employees to most accurately review impact of local measures and legality, something that our courts already do if a measure were to be unconstitutional. Local government is one of the few places where governance without partisanship exists, and I am concerned about the ability of the OAG's office to remain impartial towards ordinances that his office does not agree with, whether it's a plastic bag ban in Brownsville or an anti-corruption act limiting campaign contributions in local office, or climate charters incentivizing lower emissions. Although there is currently no fiscal note attached to this bill, members should raise the consideration that Texas voted on 97 local ballot measures last year alone. The review of local city charter impact and approval would represent a significant increase and workload for OAG employees, which, as currently staffed, they more than likely would not be able to successfully fulfill. Committee members should consider that page 7 of the Texas Attorney General's Office's agency workforce plan states that with an almost whopping 30% of the OAG's workforce, quote, eligible to retire by fiscal year 2027, the OAG's future workforce could experience potentially significant changes to its composition, end of quote. I imagine there's also additional turnover. Actually, I'm not going to say that. Members, this bill is unnecessary, degrades our democracy's checks and balances of power, will create strain on an office that is currently overwhelmed defending against and pursuing several issues, but most importantly, this bill removes local power from and confidence in the people who elected you into office. I ask you to seriously consider the issues I've raised and vote against this bill in committee to protect the local power of your constituents, preserving local control. Ballot initiatives increase and facilitate civic engagement and education, empower citizens, and on the account of misleading voters, ballot initiatives also allow local citizens to inform legislators on necessary changes and updates to code. We already have a referendum process in place that is subject to the courts. Please vote no on this unnecessary bill. Thank you. Sorry, Representative.
Thank you. Any questions?
Actually,
We do have a question for you, Vice Chair Zwiener.
I just have to say, Denise, thank you so much for being here. And this is the first time I think I've had a former staffer talking to me from the microphone as an advocate. And I'm glad it was you. Congratulations on your new gig.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair calls James Quintero, Texas Public Policy Foundation, testifying for the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members, my name is James Quintero. I represent the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I want to thank you for the opportunity to say a few words in favor of HB524 today. The rule of law is a cornerstone of our constitutional republic, ensuring that we live in a fair and just society. The bill before the committee today seeks to uphold that principle by preventing municipalities from holding elections on questions that are in conflict with state law. And it would do so through the introduction of an important check and balance, which comes in the form of Attorney General review. I'd suggest that a safeguard of this type is increasingly necessary as there have been a spate of legally suspect citizen-initiated measures put up for a vote in more recent times. And I just want to elevate a few of those instances for the committee's awareness. In May 2021, the City of Austin proposed Proposition E, which sought to institute ranked choice voting. In May 2023, the City of San Antonio, of course, pitched Proposition A, which had a host of very controversial items, including a move to decriminalize abortion, as well as low-level marijuana offenses. And then, of course, in November 24, the City of Dallas put Proposition R before voters, seeking to also decriminalize 4 ounces of marijuana or less. Now, these are just a few likely illegal measures put before voters of late. I have to wonder about the effect of putting these things before voters, what it does to their confidence as well as public trust. And so I hope policymakers take notice of this issue and make the necessary changes to strengthen the rule of law and create an important check in this system. I'll leave you with this: local control is not a license for lawlessness. So with that, I thank you for your time and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you. Representative Lowe.
So I'm just gaming this out in my head. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little torn on this.
Mm-hmm.
What if the Democrats were in charge and they were passing all of these bills these laws that we don't like? Would we want to be able to put ballot measures in place? If they were to legalize abortion and my district wanted to not have abortion clinics. Mm-hmm. So basically what I'm trying to figure out is, would we be okay with this if the roles were reversed?
No, I appreciate the question, Representative. You know, for me, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way at all, for me personally, political concerns come secondary to matters of principle. And so when I look at the situation and I try to game out what may happen in the future, what I seek to try to do first and foremost is ensure that those higher principles are in place, and then the politics we can deal with later. So to the extent that we can put in place protections and safeguards that really make sure that the rule of law is held to and observed, I think that ought to be the committee's foremost concern.
Vice Chair Zwingler.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here today, James.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Always good to see a constituent, even if you don't claim me all the time.
Yes, ma'am.
My question's actually relatively similar to Representative Lowe's, and I was digging into some of the case law on this today. I'm in law school, which means I'm reading way more cases than I should for fun. But I was sort of digging into the case law and was interested to see that most of the older cases and the cases that reached the high courts in Texas were over tax transparency provisions and cities trying to challenge and saying those tax provisions conflicted with state law or conflicted with their city charter, which is effectively conflicting with state law. So I mean, again, I'm sort of that question of, are you concerned about potentially in the future, not making any aspersions against current elected officials, but are you concerned about a dynamic where those decisions are, again, done in a more partisan way and used to really silence people advocating for things that are important to them?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Again, I go back to making sure that we uphold our principles first. And then once we have our principles in place, hopefully we do a sufficient job creating those processes by which we can honor the principles. And the processes are upheld by various policies. So when you think about how this issue is applied in the real world context, I would encourage you to think about principles, process, policy. And so again, I think this measure is geared at upholding the rule of law, which is first and foremost, in my mind, a necessary item, because if you don't have the rule of law, then what do you have? And so it's such a critical item in my mind that I'm very much in favor of this bill because of that principle alone.
Yeah, and I guess I think the other piece I'm struggling with was process, and I was grateful to hear from Rep. Tepper earlier that he does think the Attorney General's determination could be litigated. But I think between the two, of which is more expensive, a ballot proposition or a long lawsuit, or an election on a ballot proposition or a long lawsuit, I think the correct answer is lawsuit much of the time. And some of these ballot propositions, such as the one in Rep. Tepper's district, were voted down. And if you have the AG making this upfront determination, doesn't that become another lawsuit to determine that before the election's even had, and in this case, an unnecessary election?
Yes.
Or an unnecessary lawsuit, it would have been, because it was voted down in an election anyways?
I think that's a very valid concern. Litigation is costly and expensive. I would gently push back and suggest that the erosion of public trust and the loss of confidence in the system is perhaps of greater expense. And so, when you weigh the system to try and determine, what is the greater value? Is it, monetary, or is it trust in the system and confidence? For me personally, I come down on that latter element.
And I appreciate that, and something I think a lot about too, that question of why people participate. But I wonder if it works the other way, that just that opportunity to have something that feels more direct and impactful than a name that maybe they know who we are, maybe we don't, might be the most powerful thing for somebody participating in the ballot. But appreciate your perspective.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other questions? Chairman
No,
Spiller.
I'm going to leave it alone.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, members.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against the measure? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Tepper, Chairman Tepper, to close on this measure.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, this is the levels of government and the checks and balances, and I close.
Thank you. This time, the chair withdraws the committee substitute to House Bill 524, and this bill, House Bill 524, will be